Hey yo, it's it's the RAV coming at you with a special edition this week. We are going with the nostalgia shows we've been talking about for like a year already now. I will be your host this week, and with me I've got the two guys I told everyone a while back I was going to be doing the show with, but I've got Wrestling Robert from Robert Does Wrestling. What's going on, Rob?
Yeah, everything is good. I'm happy to be back into the Heelcast and do some retro talk. And there's gonna be a lot of interesting stuff we're gonna be talking about tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's my favorite period in TNA. And also with us, we've got the king of Fab Style, the professor of beating off himself. We've got Hurls with us this week as well. Hurls, what's up, dude?
What's going on, guys? Ready to talk some nostalgia of TNA wrestling. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We had Petey Williams on the Heelcast, and he said that this period was kind of like the Attitude Era for TNA, and I couldn't agree more. 2006 through 2009 was my favorite period in TNA. I mean, we leading into 2005, just kind of brief recaps. I'll let you chime in with anything if you want to. We've got the rise of Jeff Jarrett pretty much is controlling. Jeff Jarrett got labeled the Triple H of TNA for good reasons. Jeff Jarrett kind of always ended up champion there. We saw AJ Styles beat him for the belt once. Raven. We've seen legends like Diamond Dallas Page and Jeff Hardy had been in TNA at this time. Team 3D, formerly of the Dudley Boys, is in TNA. AMW and LAX had a great feud. Triple X, the Elix Skipper hitting the fucking good God Hurricane Ron off the top of the cage. The Asylum years, Vince Russo being involved. A lot of good stuff, a lot of bad stuff, but anything, of course, the X Division, and how could I forget the Unbreakable match, too, the three-way, AJ, Joe, and Daniels. But, Hurls, anything important you think I'm missing here?
Well, I think just the very first pay-per-view that TNA had, I think, was a home run. I think it really captured a lot of wrestling fans, what they were missing with just having WWE. And I just think the Fox Sports Net deal was so instrumental in the rise and popularity of TNA. I think so many people were just wanted an alternative. And when they heard about that TNA got a TV deal, it was just crazy because no other companies were getting TV deals. Wrestling was kind of frowned upon around that time after WCW and ECW went out. So I think the fact that when TNA finally got that TV deal, I think it was just really groundbreaking. And, you just saw all these big names after big names start coming to TNA. And I think they were a player ever since. So that beginning Fox Sports Net TV deal that they had was huge. And, heck, and even when they were off the air in the summer of 2005, all they had to go on was the internet and pay-per-views. So it was amazing how it's amazing talking about TNA's history because there's so much about it. But 2004, 2005 was a really, really, really good, strong period for TNA. That's where a lot of guys got their big breaks. So, eventually we'll talk more into those years. But, can't wait to talk 06 to 09.
Yeah, the Asylum years to 05, it's something that we'd thought about. Truthfully, I ordered a few of the Wednesday pay-per-views, but I didn't really fully start watching TNA until the Fox Sports deal came in. It was still Fox Sports back then, not Fox Sports 1. I just don't, for one, Old School Heel and myself, I think we're like the ones that had seen the most of it or were planning to do the show, but we really Old School Heel's not into it at the time. I don't think we knew enough about it, but it's stuff we want to eventually come back and cover at some point. But Rob, anything you want to chime in there before we lead into 2006 we may have missed from 2004 or 5 Asylum years maybe that you thought was big?
So first thing first, if it wasn't for TNA Impact, I would have not even be watching wrestling. I decided to quit wrestling after the death of Victor Quiñones. That is the owner of IWA Puerto Rico, IWA Japan, and Win from Japan. So when he died, and at that time, WWE was terrible. So if it wasn't for TNA, I wouldn't be, even watching wrestling. And my second thought that I have, if you don't know that much about Impact Wrestling, there is at least one DVD that you must have, and that is the one called TNA, The History of TNA Year 1. If you don't have it, go out and get it. That will get you up to speed into the rich history of TNA Impact Wrestling.
That's what I own.
Yeah, or just get the network too.
Yeah, or the Asylum Years DVDs too. I've actually got all 3 of those DVDs, and I got the Global Wrestling Network myself. Funny thing, I was going to kind of have us give a background history as to, where we were at as an Impact fan. Rob kind of already got there. For me personally, man, like I was a big wrestling fan since I was a little kid. I'm talking like 4 or 5 years old. I got into the WWF, eventually WCW and ECW. Like I loved all 3 of them. Literally fucking loved all 3 of them. But it was ECW and WCW folded, of course. And, it was cool because we at least thought at the time we were going to get to see a lot of, the dream matches, the WCW guys versus ECW guys versus WWF guys. Did not pan out to the way we wanted it. But, I also knew, being the wrestling fan, be kind of like a smart mark, I understood that the business needed competition. And so, I know Ring of Honor started a few months before TNA. I heard about TNA way before Ring of Honor. It was years after I'd been watching TNA before I even knew what Ring of Honor was. But, to start, I was going to get behind TNA, but, it's like the way that I saw the WWF at the time portray like Raven and Tommy Dreamer and Mike Awesome, Diamond Dallas Page, so forth, that shit really bugged me. It bothered me. And so, when I would tune into TNA, not only would I see some of my ECW favorites getting used right, but seeing DDP and Raven used the way that they were, that was one thing that hooked me. And then, of course, the young guys, the AJ Styles, the Daniels, the Chris Sabin, Samoa Joe, all of that, those were things that started to hook me. 2006, this was really the year that TNA became my preferred brand, and I feel that they started putting on better shows than the WWE. The main reason with that for me was Christian Cage. Somewhere in 2005, Christian was really my favorite wrestler in WWE at the time. I felt like he was a main eventer and needed that push, but I'll be honest with you, I would not, if I were in WWE's shoes, I wouldn't have put the belt on him either, because they had John Cena and Batista had both just won their titles. I will give the WWE that credit there. But Christian came over, and he was instantly a main eventer, and that really won me over. But Hurls, what about you, your TNA fandom? What kind of got you in there?
It was just basically, for the most part, it was just, getting sick of WWE. I was never really a WWE fan. It was always the only time I could ever say I was like WWE was my number one brand. Was early 90s when I just started getting into wrestling. My dad used to bring home WWF pay-per-views like a couple days after they happened. He would bring them home. I'd watch him. I was a huge Hulk Hogan fan all the way through the 90s. Excuse me. Took a little bit of a break. And then I saw Hulk Hogan in WCW. And from that point on, I was a huge WCW fan. Literally never missed a Nitro, never missed a Thunder, never missed a WCW Saturday Night. I watched it all. Just definitely my favorite brand. Even, I stuck with WCW till the end. I couldn't stand WWF when they would take shots at WCW. And I could just tell that the momentum was shifting for WCW, and it was unfortunate. I was like really, really devastated once WWF bought out WCW. And then the last Nitro, I had to see Vince McMahon and disrespect WCW and not even give them a proper send-off. He had to have his face all over it. So that I was already anti-WWF back then. And then I watched it. I watched it for a good 4 years after they bought WCW out. And I was just kind of like, I knew like the way Triple H buried all the WCW guys. I was like, okay, I've had enough of this. And then 2004 comes and I hear about this new promotion, TNA, starting up. I I knew about them when they had the weekly Wednesday pay-per-views. I actually did order one, but I never really thought of them as like a brand back then. It was almost just like a big indie show to me, kind of. So I didn't really get into the Asylum because I didn't think they were going to be like a major player. But once they got the Fox Sports Net TV deal, I watched that very first episode and I was hooked ever since. And they were, I would say, within maybe a couple months of them having that Fox Sports Net deal, they were probably my number one brand. Like I was 50-50 around that point. Once Victory Road happened, I was TNA all the way. I was done with WWE. It didn't, I mean, there's times when I've enjoyed WWE, but for the most part, I was just sick and tired of their booking and the way they treated some wrestlers. So it was all TNA from that point.
And one thing that I noticed, and I don't really want to get on the topic too much, but, it seemed as if you left WCW or ECW to come to the WWF, then Vince didn't bury you for the most part, unless you were like Taz or Dean Malenko and Saturn, he kind of ruined your career. But most of the people that did that were safe. The ones that he acquired, for the most part, generally got booked and treated like shit. It took Booker T a lot of years for him to become a secondary world champ. Most of us really should have wanted at WrestleMania 19. RVD, he came in, but RVD was the hottest act. He was more popular than anything. The fans were chanting for him to become the champ, and he had to pay his dues. Even Goldberg, Goldberg was not the dominant machine that he was. Mysterio, Mysterio kind of got all right in the come over, but guys like Scott Steiner and shit like that got totally ruined. But that's, like I said, one thing that attracted me to TNA. Also at TNA, as we head into the first pay-per-view, which was Final Resolution in 2006, a couple things we did not mention is, the company did almost fail and go under. Jeff Jarrett founded it. He got the loan from Dixie Carter to keep the company going. Obviously, Dixie Carter and Jeff Jarrett and a falling out is something we're going to be discussing it in length here later on during the show when we get to the right time. And also, the one fucking cool thing about TNA that you would never, ever, 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 ever guess in a million years was the case, was that TNA Wrestling had by far in wrestling the most crazy, intense, live, wild crowd since ECW. And it's a shame, man. I watch old school TNA and it's just like, holy shit, these crowds. Obviously, we got Hogan to thank for that, but what do you guys think about the crowds before we just start? Rob, what'd you think?
Yeah, the crowd, I was kind of familiar, by the way, with the Impact Zone. I don't know if you remember this company called XWF. That was a company done by the Nasty Boys and stuff, and they used to record near what is now the Impact Zone. So I was aware of, but it is true what you're saying, Raven Effect. Energy have died down, but I do have my gripe what that happened, but that is gonna be a topic for later on. But it is kind of sad into a sense watching the old footage, but this is not a podcast to talk about bad things. We're talking about all the great stuff from the golden era of Impact Wrestling. Good.
Absolutely. Hurls, what do you think of the crowds back then, man?
Oh, the crowds were great. You couldn't beat them. I mean, they were super loud. They were full of energy. They were nonstop, making noise. That crowd was great, and you kind of got familiar with some of the people that kept coming there, and you still do to this day. But they were great crowds, hot crowds, and rarely did they ever not chant anything. I think it was a testimony to how great they actually were. And I remember once Impact got signed Diamond Dallas Page, that's when they really started showing up there, and they had to start turning people away from the building because so many people wanted to be a part of those shows.
Hurls, do you remember the pop at the Impact Zone when they announced that they were going to Spike TV? Have you seen that footage?
I do remember that a little bit. I remember the Kurt Angle one being ridiculously loud.
Man, that one was insane. The one when they announced the TV deal. Oof, holy cow. That crowd was hot.
Yeah, that was amazing. I was there for Destination X 2006. That was a hot crowd too, really hot. That was Scott Steiner's debut. I remember when he came out, the crowd was hot. TNA always had hot crowds in that time period.
And nowadays it's the NXT crowd and the Ring of Honor crowd that get labeled as the best crowds in wrestling. They didn't have shit on the original TNA crowds. So guys, let's hop into the first pay-per-view, which was Final Resolution in January, which later on Final Resolution became a December pay-per-view. Also worth mentioning is that there was no TNA championships back in these days. It was all under the NWA. So the NWA Heavyweight Championship, Tag Team Championship, and then there was the TNA X Division Championship. But the world title and the Tag Team title was under the NWA banner. So Hurls, actually, because I didn't think it was that relevant, but Hurls found so AJ Styles defeated Tanahashi at this pay-per-view. Just the relevance in that, because I don't watch New Japan or pay attention to Japanese wrestling.
Yeah, this was the loan that TNA used from New Japan. Tanahashi was probably just beginning to be in his prime, and he was a big deal in New Japan around this time, and it's just very interesting to see these two go at it when you really didn't think about it at the time, because we didn't really, let's not get it twisted. New Japan wasn't even close to where they are nowadays. Like, their popularity is way bigger than it ever has right now. But back then, Tanahashi, unless you were a really big wrestling mark or you lived in Japan, he was a big key to New Japan's success, and to have these two go at it was something special.
Rob, did you have any thoughts on Tanahashi?
Not at this point in time.
All right, guys. So a feud was going on with Larry Zbyszko for some reason with my man Raven. So it kind of came to an end. So Raven was placed in a match with X-Pac, a.k.a. Six-Pac, a.k.a. Sean Waltman, to become the number one contender or be fired from TNA Wrestling. Storyline-wise, Raven lost and was fired from TNA, so he took a little break there. AMW, America's Most Wanted, one of the greatest tag teams in the history of the company, which was Jim Storm, Wildcat Chris Harris defeated Team 3D, formerly known as the Dudley Boys. Samoa Joe was continuing his undefeated streak. He retained his X Division title against Christopher Daniels. And they say that this was Sting's official TNA Wrestling debut, which I've never understood, because I know Sting was around there a couple of times in the younger days. But he teamed with Christian Cage to defeat NWA champion at the time, Double J Jeff Jarrett, and the Alpha Male Monty Brown in the main event. For some reason, Hurls still thinks Alpha Male and Monty Brown is like someone special that needs to come back. Hurls, do you want to just profess your love for the Alpha Male here before we move on to the next pay-per-view?
Yeah, he was very entertaining. He had great mic skills. Wasn't the most polished wrestler, but he had charisma, and I think he's a beloved TNA wrestler around this time period.
Yeah, I gotta pick it up from there. I think, into a sense, it is one of those topics that we talk about, but without actually addressing it. TNA at that time was like the land of the opportunity, right? And into a sense, that was also what hurt Impact Wrestling. I was on board with the push of Christian Cage received at the beginning. He was excellent. I always thought he was way better than Edge. But after the Christian Cage feud, Monty Brown kind of went downhill. And there is still, to this day, people who have resentment in that. And I cannot blame them. Go ahead, Raven.
Can I just say, too, that Monty Brown was he had some unpredictability factor to him when he was giving his promos. I don't say he wasn't as crazy as a Scott Steiner, but we all remember the infamous pay-per-view when the roof caught on fire and Monty Brown gave a unscripted 10-minute promo. Like, seriously, go back and watch that promo. It's freaking hilarious. So he's kind of has that Scott Steiner love, for me. I think Monty Brown was, when you talk about his catchphrase, the pounce, period, like that was getting over.
Yeah, the pounce was awesome. Definitely, Monty Brown is greater than Marcus Corvan, whatever you want to call it. That's for sure. But also, since we're on the topic of promos and all, I always felt that and it wasn't at this time period, so we're not going to talk about it, but Christian Cage's debut, his promo that he cut in Impact or TNA, about how he loved wrestling and that's why he was here and all, I thought that was genius. Kept him on a roll. We kept that roll going on to Against All Odds. Actually, you know what, real fast, man, do we know why, either you know why they dubbed it as Sting's official TNA wrestling debut, even though he had been in the company before in the very early days, like made appearances and whatnot?
I think they called it his TNA debut because he actually signed a contract, whereas before it was just kind of like a one-off.
Yeah. Okay. We also forgot to mention getting a Sting is a big deal. Just signing on your first pay-per-view a Sting, that turn the eyes into the old WCW fans. That kind of gain trust with that audience, saying, hey, these people are for real. They got Sting. They got the big guns.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, I guess. Good point.
You got a WCW legend, and he was like, most people thought he was, the last time you really saw him was at the end of Nitro. That's what most people remembered his last appearance as. And, the stuff leading up to that was great. The stuff with Eric Young they did with him, I thought it was awesome. So it was huge to get an icon like Sting.
Yeah, let's be honest. We got the WCW icon. Sting was the face of WCW. Yeah, I guess we undersold the importance of literally just how big of an icon and legend this guy was. Really, the one true guy who, for so many years never went to the WWF or WWE to get that legendary status. And so this was huge. And I was happy as hell to see Sting come to TNA and not go to the WWF. Or what? No, 2006 WWE at the time. But the other thing that was happy as hell, man, is we moved on to Against All Odds. For some reason, the LAX began a feud with the James Gang. I don't know why I say some reason, because let's be honest, man. The New Age Outlaws are the James Gang, one of the greatest tag teams in wrestling history. That was another thing that I liked about TNA was the legends that they bring in. We saw a bunch of first time legendary matches. What I say I don't understand why is because they got BG James's father, Bullet Bob Armstrong, involved in the feud for a while there. The LAX retained. TNA had the Monster Rhino, or not the Monster Rhino, the War Machine, the Man Beast Rhino. He defeated the Monster Abyss in a Falls Count Anywhere match after he gored Abyss off the stage through 4 tables. And then for the sequel, AJ versus Daniels versus Joe, which is the first one is widely regarded as the greatest match in TNA history. Some say wrestling history. But Samoa Joe keeps his undefeated streak going, retains the X Division title. And then my favorite moments, my favorite match, my favorite thing in the history of TNA, my man Christian Cage defeats Jeff Jarrett to become the NWA World Champion. Guys, I guess, the things to talk about there. Is there anything there that sticks out other than the Christian thing that you want to talk about? I'll start with you, Rob.
Yeah, that finish of the Christian Cage Jeff Jarrett match. Holy cow! Was the Impact Zone hot or what? This was another solid main event. Main event, no, but pay-per-view. Back to back. Even though, not every single match was a killer match, but it was really easy to watch. And you have special moments, like obviously the rematch between AJ Daniels and Samoa Joe. And that main event, man, that main event was solid as hell. Christian Cage defeating Jeff Jarrett. Go ahead, Hurls.
Yeah, this pay-per-view I remember watching it like it was yesterday. This pay-per-view was really, really good. A lot of great action. Obviously, the title change. You were so sick of Jeff Jarrett holding that belt that when he finally lost it to Christian, it was just a great moment. And it was a great moment for Christian's career to finally show that, hey, yeah, I can main event and I can be the top guy. And I think that's what made that so special. You know, some other things that kind of stand out, the Rhino Abyss match, that was awesome. Just great hardcore action. What can you say about Joe, Styles, and Daniels? They tore the house down again. And, you know, Team 3D, this was like right around the time that they made the change from WWE to Impact. So, you know, it was cool to see them against Team Canada. I think this was a really, really fun pay-per-view.
You know, a couple things. I never realized how much I loved tag team wrestling until the WWF bought WCW and ECW, and then they really kind of dismantled tag team wrestling and made it irrelevant. This company, I feel, had the greatest tag team division, one of all time, and this really revitalized my love for tag team wrestling, but we're going to talk about this later. You know, yeah, the Rhino, you know, I've never been too big of a Rhino guy, but WWF kind of watered him down. But let's not forget the way that this man was portrayed in ECW, and he was not only the final world champion, but he was a TV champ at the same time. I think TNA maybe used Rhino a little too well at the start, especially at Bound for Glory 2005. But you know, Christian winning, I didn't think the match was that great, but Christian winning the belt was my favorite moment. The fans coming out to the ring and whatnot. I think maybe we should emphasize the fact that Joe's undefeated streak was fucking amazing. What they were doing with Joe, it was just well done. It was believable, man. Like, you know, the Goldberg shit, it was like 50 different numbers every week, and it'd be like, how in the hell did he wrestle so many people and beat them? But, you know, the Samoa Joe undefeated streak that TNA did was great. And I think when we get to the end of it, we'll probably talk more about it. But we hop into Destination X, where we got the James Gang with Bullet Bob defeating LAX. They do the third time. Daniels, Styles, and Joe number 3. Only they took place in Ultimate X at this point. This allows them to get the X Division title off of Joe. And the Fallen Angel at the time, Christopher Daniels, won the X Division title. However, days later, was defeated by Samoa Joe, who won the belt back. In the main event, as Rob actually brought up a little bit earlier, Christian Cage defeated Monty Brown. I think those are really the highlights for that pay-per-view. There's nothing I really plan to talk about at this point, unless you guys feel something to chime in. We can move into Lockdown.
Yeah, solid pay-per-view. Go ahead, Hurls.
Yeah. I just want to talk about this one. This is another one that I was there for. This was at the Impact Zone. I was on vacation. First time I ever went to the Impact Zone, and thank God I went on the message boards, because the message boards back then were more popular than social media was, and people were talking about how long you had to wait in line to get into TNA. And thank God I did that, because me and my dad, we showed up there about 4 hours early to the pay-per-view and barely got in. Thank God we met a TNA street team guy that came by himself. He was from Canada, and he was allowed to bring in guests into the Impact Zone because he was a street team member. So thank God for that. And we got into the pay-per-view and we got to watch it. And some of the matches that stick out being there live was the 8-man war. They battled all throughout the Impact Zone. We were like maybe about a couple yards away from Jeff Jarrett and Ron the Truth Killings. So that was really cool. And Jay Lethal was just kind of making his he was fresh at that point, and he was very over with the Impact crowd. But I'll never forget when Scott Steiner came in, because he was one of my dad's favorite wrestlers, and this was the first time that I got to see Sting live in person, even though he was doing this weird, like, I don't know, like retirement angle kind of thing where he just showed up as Steve Borden. So it was kind of strange, but it was cool to see him live, and it was cool to see Scott Steiner live as well. So that was really awesome event, and it's one of my favorite wrestling events ever.
Rose, was this Destination X?
Yeah, this was 06.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you went to that too. That's awesome.
Yeah, those were the two. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that in the pre-show. I went to Lockdown 07, and Destination X06.
That's very cool, man.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I have a lot of at my dad's house. I got a lot of pictures. I'll have to dig those up and post them so you guys can see. So
absolutely, man. Let me see. So we moved on to Lockdown. I've actually seen this pay-per-view quite a bit. For some reason, they had a fucking arm wrestling match where Bullet Bob Armstrong defeated Conan. Man, I don't even know if I want to talk about how fucking stupid I thought this stuff was. Just bringing Bullet Bob, man, and doing it. For one, no one likes to see arm wrestling. It's the same shit every time in pro wrestling. I don't know why they were bringing Bullet Bob around, but they did it. What can I say there? But there was that. Samoa Joe retained against Sabu, Sabu's another guy. I have different feelings towards the guy now after hearing about the dog incident in the hotel. But I was a huge Sabu fan. Loved the fucking guy. And TNA booked him pretty well. But Samoa Joe just going out there and just handling the fuck out of Sabu. It just really put Joe over, in my opinion. Christian Cage retained against the Monster Abyss. And then the main event, you had Sting, AJ, Rhino, and Ron the Truth Killings defeating Double J, AMW, and the wrestling debut of Scott Steiner. This is a memorable pay-per-view to me. The next pay-per-view actually stood out more for one reason. But, Hurls, any thoughts or anything you want to chime in on this pay-per-view before we move into Sacrifice?
Well, this was the feud where Biss tried to commit attempted murder onto Christian when he went to his house and tried to drown him in his own pool. I think we all kind of remember the lead up to that. That was pretty cool.
Christian's gorgeous wife, ex-wife now, but...
Oh, I didn't even realize they got a divorce. Huh. Okay. Also, there was a young Puma, aka Manic, aka TJ Perkins, who was in on this pay-per-view. So I think that's kind of worth noting. Other than that, I think this was Loki's return as well, correct? Against Christopher Daniels. He came back and he was named Senshi instead of the Loki that we all know him as. So I think this was his return to the company, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, let me chime in. Oh, I think you kind of guys missed the biggest spot of the night. The Chase Stevens doing the shooting star press from the top of the cage during the X Division match. Holy cow, one of the most insane spots I have ever seen. And Chase Stevens, it is not a small dude. So that match was badass. The Christian Cage Abyss was badass, and the main event was also solid. I think during this time was when Dutch Mantel got into Impact Wrestling and he was helping writing from the time being. So at this time was when I actually felt like at home when I was watching TNA, because obviously I grew up watching wrestling that was booked by Dutch Mantel. Go ahead, Raven.
This is why I'm glad to have you two around with me on this show. So we move into Sacrifice. Now, heading into Sacrifice, Christopher Daniels came back from a concussion, comes back as a babyface because he turns face and saves his nemesis, AJ Styles, against AMW. Now, back in the days, man, this was a good stable. They had Jeff Jarrett, AMW as the heels, Gail Kim was around, and was Scott Steiner kind of part of this stable? Not necessarily like a full-blown stable and together unity, but it's like they were always hanging around each other, and you knew that there was a like an alliance between the two. Was Steiner involved in that with those four too?
Yeah, yes, because he actually helped them beat up Sting and Christian at Destination. That was kind of the guy they brought in. Yeah, he was a part of them.
And I think like AMW, man, they were, they played the babyface role for so long and did it so well. But when they were with Jarrett, man, the AMW had this really vicious streak to him. And the younger days of the Cowboy, James Storm, man, he really had this vicious streak too. And Chris Harris. And I think AMW, man, they're like one of the more underrated tag teams in history of TNA. And not only TNA, because I feel like this is one of the 2 or 3 greatest tag team divisions ever. So I'll say of all time. But we had Jushin Thunder Liger, the megastar himself, made a TNA debut, I believe. He beat Petey Williams in a World X Cup match. A&W defeated Styles and Daniels. So Gail Kim helped out. They used a nightstick, but AMW retained against Styles and Daniels. My man Raven returned to pay-per-view in a storyline, defeating the guy that Hurls for some reason still thinks is worth noting, A1. Sting was going to take on Double J and Scott Steiner, and to boost him up to the next level, he picked Samoa Joe as his tag team partner, and they won that match. In the main event is one of my favorite matches of all time too, and I know I'm going to sound like I'm on Christian Cage's dick this entire show, but Christian Cage retaining against Abyss in the Full Metal Mayhem. I always remember Christian with Abyss has the fucking, wasn't a steel chain tagged around Christian's neck, and he's through the middle ropes, and he's just pulling on it, and I thought that match was great. One of my favorite pay-per-views in the history of this company. Robert, anything you want to say on this one?
Yeah, Christian Cage was given the ball to run as the world champion, and he was kick-ass back to back. When he won the title from Jarrett, that was a solid match. The one before Lockdown versus Abyss, another solid match, and this one in the Full Metal Mayhem was another excellent match. Another thing that I may need to point out was the World X Cup gauntlet match with Black Tiger and Petey Williams, Alex Shelley. Another fun little match with all the X Division stars. Go ahead, Hurls.
Yeah, this match or this pay-per-view was pretty good. Not a lot sticks out to me in this one. Not as much as it did to you, Raven, but it was I remember it being a very fun pay-per-view, especially the X Cup Gauntlet match. I remember that being really cool because I think this was the one where they hyped up Shocker, who was like, I guess he was a big star in Mexico, but I actually thought he wasn't very good at all. He was in those McDonald's commercials around this time.
I remember.
I remember them, hyping him up like he was, but I think he was kind of in his 40s at this point, so he didn't really impress me too much, but it was cool to see all these stars in one ring. That's for sure.
It's funny you remind me of that because in true LOL TNA fashion, they legitimately made a big deal on TNA with it, and the announcers and all that this dude was in McDonald's commercials. LOL TNA. I still love this goddamn company. We head into Slammiversary. Now, I don't feel like Slammiversary was, the spectacle that it is now, or at least started out way back in these days. But, of course, I'm going to have some event about at the end of it. But one thing I thought was really, really cool, man, as I talk about these dream and first-time matches, and I think it actually happened in the WWF before, but Team 3D against the James Gang, a.k.a. the Dudley Boys, beating the New Age Outlaws, man. It's two of the greatest teams ever, and you're really going to see that feud. And that's things I loved about TNA. Apparently, this is where low-key returned to Senshi, and maybe I just wrote this wrong, but he won an X Division Rankings elimination match. I actually loved him as Senshi, man. I love the Senshi thing. We had in something that sparked into pretty entertaining TV, but Kevin Nash aligning with Alex Shelley in his feud with Chris Sabin, and Nash came in and actually defeated Chris Sabin. And then we led to the feud with Samoa Joe and Scott Steiner, which actually turned out to be a lot better than I thought. I thought these two kind of really matched up well together. Joe getting the win over Scott Steiner. And then the thing that pissed me off, man, is King of the Mountain match, and Jeff Jarrett regains the NWA title. When Christian's title was hot, of course, Jeff Jarrett has to come in, swoop, and take it out from under him. I've never been so pissed off at this company until, 2010. This was literally the only time I was really pissed at TNA for a long time. So I guess a lot happened at Slammiversary. Hurls, anything you got to chime in on this one?
This was the famous Earl Hebner Screwjob, correct?
Yeah, it's actually what I was going to bring up next, but
okay. Sorry for
go for it, man. Go for it. It takes time away from us.
Okay, yeah, I do remember that. That was kind of one of the questionable decisions that they made. It was still a really good match, really fun match. Definitely not one of my favorite King of the Mountain matches ever, but it was still a really good pay-per-view. You got to see Samoa Joe and Scott Steiner. I remember enjoying that match quite a bit. It was the creation of Staniels AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels, them getting their first tag team run. So that was pretty cool.
Because I just noticed I forgot to mention it. I skipped right over it. Daniels saying they defeated AMW for the belts in a 250-day reign. So thank you for bringing that up. I totally saw that. I looked over that.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And I think this is, if I remember correctly, this is the match where Kevin Nash does an elbow drop off of the bottom rope, and because he was starting the feud with the X Division wrestlers, and I believe the crowd started chanting "Holy shit!" I thought that was hilarious. This is definitely the match. I think this is actually where Kevin Nash kind of revitalized his career, so to speak, because he was always doing stuff with Scott Hall and blah blah blah. But this is where Kevin Nash started doing something a little different, and he was kind of evolving. And I think like the Impact Zone, they took a pretty big fondness for Kevin Nash when he started doing this stuff. So I think this like helped Kevin Nash kind of, keep his career going. And, what can you really say? I think another really good pay-per-view, Team 3D and the James Gang going at it. They had a pretty good build-up because they really only fought like a couple times in WWE. So it was cool to see them wrestle in TNA. And the whole thing was about, Team 3D making their name in bingo halls. That's why they had this bingo hall match. So really fun pay-per-view, except for the ending. The ending was kind of disappointing because at this time, I think every TNA fan was tired of Jeff Jarrett winning that darn belt.
So
yeah.
I cannot.
You bring in Kevin Nash. We're gonna talk Papa pretty soon here, but sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I cannot disagree into the sense that this was great visuals. Seeing Jeff Jarrett escalating the ladder and people at the Impact Zone throwing trash at him, that was a priceless moment. And so that, of course, is gonna bring heat into the company. But I think it might have been worth it. By the way, because as a yin to that yang, you have AJ Styles and Daniels winning the tag team belts from a long-standing heels like America's Most Wanted. And this, by the way, this was another good pay-per-view, easy to watch. This is what people were at that time expecting out of TNA. Give me something that is easy to watch. So they managed to do another win on this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's my beef with that, and I was super mad at the time because, for one, like, obviously it's well known I'm a big Christian Cage guy, but I feel like Christian took the ball, like, and Rob just mentioned, just a few minutes ago, Christian took the ball, was given the ball, and he ran with it and was having fantastic matches. I think he was a great world champ. And I think that they needed to keep going with him as a champion, but for them to end it the way that they did, and it's more of the person who ended up taking it on top of it too, because, I mean, let's face it, the very early days, AJ Styles became the world champion. Rug pulled out from under him, goes back to Jeff Jarrett. Raven gets the belt for a short amount of time, goes back to Jarrett. Rhino gets the belt, goes back to Jarrett. It's like Jarrett was almost constantly the champion in this company, and it really that was one of maybe a handful of reasons that it really held TNA down. And for that to happen, it was just like fucking Triple H of TNA strikes again, and it pissed me off. Of course, the duplication of the Montreal Screwjob has happened so many times, but as a result of this, Jim Cornette was introduced as the management director, basically an on-air authority figure. He told Double J he could keep the title as long as he defended against the winner of the four-way match at Victory Road. And then also we had Senshi actually win the X Division title from Samoa Joe by pinning Sanjay Dutt in a three-way match. So two big things happened there. And then let's see here. They actually didn't want to use Jim Cornette too much, so because he didn't want to take too much time away from the wrestling. And actually what was brought in to be his bodyguard was Matt Morgan. Now, anyone that follows Hurls on Twitter knows that he met Matt Morgan in the past, and he actually got the DNA of TNA's DNA in his mouth. So Matt Morgan, man, he was a guy that he came in I saw him in the WWF, and I just thought, this dude is a fucking monster. This dude has a look. This dude has everything to him. And then it was they just gave him a stupid stuttering gimmick and ruined him. And one thing that I really liked about TNA was they'd use a lot of the guys in the WWE or WWF that they didn't use properly, like Christian and then Matt Morgan and some others, and actually were able to use them the right way. Anything you guys want to chime in on just the things that I said before we talk Victory Road here?
Yeah, I am a fan of Matt Morgan. I think he was obviously underutilized on the other side of town. So at this moment in time, TNA was the land of the opportunity. So seeing him come in, I was like, man, when he's gonna get in the ring? Hopefully they give him at least a fair and square chance. Go ahead, Hurls.
Yeah, Matt Morgan was another guy, like 7 foot. Like, how do you go wrong with a 7-footer that's pretty athletic? Played college basketball. I remember my favorite college basketball team is Marquette. Marquette actually played against him when he went to Monmouth in the tournament. So I remember seeing him as a college basketball player, which is crazy. But yeah, it was a great talent to get. And Jim Cornette was obviously a big fan of his. The only thing that was kind of irritating me at this point was when they brought him in, they waited a long, long time before they actually started using him as a wrestler. He was Jim Cornette's bodyguard for like the longest time. So it was just kind of like, are they ever going to let this guy wrestle? I remember thinking that. That's really about it with Matt Morgan.
Yeah, I remember it took a long time for them to get Morgan wrestling too. So we go into Victory Road, and Senshi retains against Kazarian. Raven ended the feud with Zbyszko after all this time. He defeated him in a hair versus hair match. I fucking hate Larry Zbyszko, man. I've hated him since WCW. I've never found him to be a living legend. I've just wanted the guy gone, and I think this was literally the end of him here. You had Jay Lethal, stepping up the ladder. Him and Chris Sabin defeated the Paparazzi, which was Kevin Nash and Alex Shelley, which we're going to talk here in a minute. And then in the main event, Sting defeated Christian, Scott Steiner, and Samoa Joe. So Sting would be the challenger for Jeff Jarrett. Guys, the Paparazzi series, man, you talked about Kevin Nash and all that. I've always been a Kevin Nash fan. I really have. I've been a fan of Kevin Nash since he was Big Daddy Cool Diesel. Love the guy. The Paparazzi series, man, with him messing around with the X Division and all, I can't remember the gist of why he did it and whatnot, but it gave his career a new spark. And I think it turned a lot of smarks that want to hate Kevin Nash and say you can't wrestle because they're douchebags, kind of back on his side. And Nash, he hit that fucking arm drag on Sabin, I believe, and it was like the best arm drag in the business. It was awesome. I don't necessarily remember like the gist of the beginning of it, but I remember always being entertained by the Paparazzi series until towards the end there, which we'll talk later. Robert, Hurls, anything about the Paparazzi series you wanted to add?
Oh, see, yes, I have something to tell about that. So earlier on, I mentioned that Dutch Mantel was the booker, right? So that Paparazzi gimmick was not the first time that he used that. He used that on the island. The difference was that the Paparazzi here on the island, who was, by the way, a wrestler, he did it like on a gossip, like you would say, like something like TMC. Like he was the one getting into wrestlers' locker rooms and stuff like that. And he would do like a middle of the show like report saying all the gossip and stuff like that. So when Dutch Mantel brought that kind of idea into TNA, into Alex Shelley, he did it like, okay, into a more of a trollish type of videos, and obviously Alex Shelley recording wrestling matches to, I guess, study his opponent. So that is my comment about the Paparazzi video series and all the stuff that Kevin Nash did with Alex Shelley. Go ahead, Hurls.
The Paparazzi Championship Series was amazing. Some of the stuff that they did with Kevin Nash was hilarious, from the inclusion of Bob Backlund and all the kind of the jackass stuff they were doing. It was pretty funny. But not only that, even the interviews that Kevin Nash was doing with Alex Shelley, where he talks about money and sales of the business and how to make money. That was funny. Just some great stuff. And like I said before, it definitely the Smarks started to take a liking to Kevin Nash, even though they were always making the quad jokes about him. But they actually he started to get over with the paparazzi. I thought it was a great gimmick.
Yeah, I did too, man. Speaking of a great gimmick, so as we head into Hard Justice, this is about the time that Konnan departs from TNA, citing some racism, leading to lawsuits, an 11-year dispute. We didn't see Konnan back until 2017, man. Can
I say something real quick? Sorry to cut you off, but
no, absolutely, man.
We kind of missed. Was this brother at Victory Road? Was this brother Runt's debut?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he debuted, and then we also had Sorelda. If we remember her, she lasted about a cup of coffee in TNA, but I think it's worth noting, since she's teamed with Staniels. I think the Road to Victory match, was that a number one contenders match as well, I believe?
The Sting, Christian, Steiner, and Joe match?
Yeah.
It's the one that Cornette announced the winner would Jarrett can keep his belt as long as he wrestled the winner of that, which happened at the next review at Hard Justice.
Okay, that's all I really wanted to note about Victory Road 06.
Yeah, I mean, the Konnan departure, which was crazy because LAX, man, was such a dominant team and so over. At first it didn't seem like a big hit to lose Konnan, but through the years, you saw LAX kind of disintegrate and not be they were. And all the lawsuits and the negativity that Konnan would have towards TNA until Jeff Jarrett made his return. But so Hard Justice, we had Senshi retaining against Jay Lethal and Petey Williams. What started one of the best feuds in the history of this company, in my opinion, you had Styles and Daniels defeating LAX. And so Sting winning that match, he was supposed to challenge Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett did defeat Sting to retain. Scott Steiner was in Double J's corner. Christian Cage was in Sting's. And what I think was a terrible move is they had Christian turn heel and cost Sting the match. Man, there's wrestlers that much better as a heel than a face. Much better as a face and a heel. And then there's some, like Goldberg just can't play a heel. Jeff Hardy really can't work as a heel. Sting, not too much of a heel, although he kind of turned it. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, wouldn't have worked as a face and so forth. Christian Cage is one of those guys, man, that I just feel is so much better as a face. And I thought this was a dumb move. But that's all I'm going to say before we head into Bound for Glory. Either of you have anything you want to chime in on that one?
This last pay-per-view, the Big Story Road, I felt that this was not as good as all the other ones, right? This one, Hard Justice 2006, this was more of a traditional pay-per-view that you will have like lower card matches being shorter, and then the 3 main events, right? They were the longest. So they did a little bit different into the sense of how to book a show time-wise on pay-per-view. That was something that also stood when you were watching that pay-per-view. And LAX versus Christopher Daniels, one of the best feud on TNA Impact Wrestling history, especially in the tag team division. Go ahead, Hurls.
I was just going to say, this is the pay-per-view where the roof caught on fire because of pyro and the famous Monty Brown promo that followed. So that for sure is something to watch. But I remember enjoying this match or this pay-per-view. It was good, not the best, but I was a little surprised that they turned Christian heel at this pay-per-view, but I think it was worth it from what we got coming after.
Yeah.
You want to hear some wild shit, some crazy shit that you might not believe is not only did I not know, but I have never seen or heard about the fucking roof catching on fire at this pay-per-view until just today.
Wow.
I had no idea.
Yeah. After I think it was the Johnny Divine match. I think that was it, and then the roof caught on fire, and they did like a series of promos back to back to back in order to cut time into finally getting the firefighters and getting all the thing fixed. And they they didn't hesitate. As soon as it was clear, they went ahead and continued the pay-per-view. So that was also badass for them to do.
Well, of course we've caught on fire, man. I mean, nothing was hotter than Johnny Divine's wrestling career and the fantastic matches and memories Johnny Divine left us. Of course he caught the roof on fire.
Also, Jimmy Jacobs wrestled on this pay-per-view.
No shit.
Yeah.
Was this before Johnny Divine got stabbed or after he got stabbed?
I think it was before.
Okay.
I apparently, there's a lot I didn't know, which when we start 2007, maybe I'll give a brief explanation. Things will kind of make more sense. But it's still the following impact after this pay-per-view. We had LAX defeat AJ Styles and Daniels for the NWA tag titles in a border brawl match. Also, during this period, we had Sting agree to a career versus title match at Bound for Glory. So Sting actually stopped wrestling so he could train exclusively for this Bound for Glory match against Double J. So we headed into No Surrender. So we had Senshi continue on his role through the X Division. What was dubbed as the match of the year in TNA with Styles and Daniels defeating LAX in Ultimate X. The main event is kind of a strange one. We had the champion Jeff Jarrett wrestle non-title match against Samoa Joe and lose in a lumberjack match. And what capped it off was probably the biggest announcement. Okay, maybe second biggest. I forgot about one that ruined the company, but TNA got Kurt Angle signed in his prime from the WWE, his release, and that was the big news to cap off the show. Hurls, was there any surrender you wanted to say?
No, I think I having difficulty remembering that Samoa Joe versus Jeff Jarrett match, especially since it was non-title. That one kind of eludes me. I remember the Christian Cage versus Rhino match. I do remember that. I do remember the Naturals getting paired up with Shane Douglas. This was kind of like their last stuff before they kind of broke up for the most part.
Yeah, I remember the Naturals. I thought that was better than they let it go on for. I think I'm a Shane Douglas guy though. I thought that him with the Naturals, I forgot all about that. I thought that was pretty good. And also, real quick, was this Joe and Jarrett match? Was that the first like fans revenge where they like had the straps and were beating Jarrett's ass?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep. Yeah, there's not too much I remember about this match or this pay-per-view. It was definitely good, but it just wasn't really that memorable. But I mean, besides the Daniels LAX, I think that was the best match. But yeah, that's really all I remember from it, for the most part.
Yeah, that AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels versus LAX Ultimate X match was a very solid match, and that ending, man. Well, are we gonna jump to that, right?
Well, I'm sorry, we're gonna jump to what?
The Angle debut.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's what's coming next,
bro.
Oh,
I still remember to this day. I was, not that impressed by the main event, right? I was like, okay, things are still good on Impact, and when it's all, hey, there's an announcement and blah blah blah, and the lights went dark, right? And you see just a spotlight and someone just standing in the corner of the six-sided ring. And when he turns around and starts doing the wrestling stuff, and I was like, no, this cannot be real. This cannot be real. And when he took out his hoodie and it was Kurt Angle, I was yelling. I was like, fuck yeah. We are for real. We are a legit wrestling company with Kurt Angle. I was like, man, holy shit, how they did it. This was incredible. I still to this day that brings goosebumps into the sense of, how big it was getting Kurt Angle to join TNA, and all the matches that we will see, we saw all over the years that he did in TNA. Holy shit, that announcement was badass. Go ahead.
You know, I forgot all about that, Rob. Listening to you tell me, man, I started kind of getting the chills and the goosebumps going down. And honestly, and I should say this too, is honest to God, I always felt like the Kurt Angle signing is what legitimized TNA wrestling. Not Sting, not Christian, not the tag teams, but when they got Kurt freaking Angle in his prime of his career, man, that was what made the company like full on legit to any believer to me, in my opinion. But
yeah, it was shocking because nobody could have saw that for miles. Nobody would have thought Kurt Angle would have left WWE. He was, doing. I mean, towards the end of his WWE run wasn't great, but I mean, everything he did before that, he was just, kind of. I don't want to say the poster boy. He was never the poster boy, but he was always just a big WWE guy, and you would have never thought that he would have left and showed up into TNA. And I don't think any dirt sheet called that. It was kind of similar to Christian. Christian, I think they had some speculation that maybe he might show up, but Kurt Angle was out of nowhere. And I remember just freaking out when I saw the USA ring gear, and I was like, oh my goodness, and it was just a crazy pop. Like, just nobody saw it coming. And that was just huge.
Yeah. And then, so, I mean, we go into Bound for Glory, a memorable Bound for Glory, because you talked about that pay-per-view not being as memorable. So Kurt gets announced as the enforcer for the match. But if you want to talk about memorable, the one thing I think maybe the most standout moment in the history of TNA is just a few days before Bound for Glory, Samoa Joe, or Kurt Angle confronts Samoa Joe, and we all know what happens there, the headbutt heard around the world. I'll never forget that moment. I mean, the blood going out after the headbutt, it was a fucking headbutt. We can talk. I'm going to run down the main things on the card here, but since it's a big moment, is there, Hurls, anything you want to say about the headbutt heard around the world?
Oh, it was just like to match Kurt Angle's debut. They went for the home run right away, and pairing him up with Samoa Joe was just like, wow, they're gonna go this route already. That's crazy, but that was a great way to bring him in, and it was just red hot. I mean, that's like one of TNA's unforgettable moments. You just never forget that when those two finally got in the ring together.
Yeah, and the visuals of seeing, Kurt Angle headbutting Samoa Joe, and then from the back, Samoa Joe just, turn around full of blood just to have a brawl. That was incredible. They did the right thing by, doing that as the first feud, and then, you will have the big pay-per-view, Bound for Glory, and the next one, it is gonna be the first Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle match. By the way, I might need to say something. This is my favorite look of TNA, the one that they have during Bound for Glory 2006, red with the yellow things, right? Letters, and the 6-sided ring. You will have two cameras, and the one camera from above the ring. I always like that little touch. So this is one of my favorites arena setup in TNA history, the one on Bound for Glory 2006, and one of my favorite pay-per-views done by TNA. I list my top 5 or top 6 main events. Pay-per-view, sorry. Go ahead, Raven.
No problem, man. So, I mean, Bound for Glory, some of the highlights. I was wrong about Zbyszko. So, Zbyszko loses to EY. I remember the whole don't fire Eric stuff going on. So, Eric Young defeats Larry Zbyszko in a loser gets fired match. Real quick, I will say this is when I started to actually really see that Eric Young is a fucking funny person. We had Samoa Joe defeating Abyss, Raven, and Brother Runt in a Monsters Ball match. For some reason, they brought in Jake the Snake as the special referee for it. I don't remember why. I don't fucking get it at all. We're not talking the resurrected Jake the Snake. We're talking the drunk crackhead Jake the Snake. honestly, man, and this is this match to me, I feel it's the most underrated match in the history of this company, was Chris Sabin finally getting that victory over Senshi to win the X Division title. LAX defeating Styles and Daniels for the tag team titles in the 6 Sides of Steel. And then, of course, the big one, the Stinger winning the NWA World title from Jeff Jarrett. Angle's the enforcer. I feel everyone kind of knew Sting was going to win. Rob, you were just singing the praise about Bound for Glory. I'll go ahead and let you start on that. We'll let Hurls talk Bound for Glory after that.
So first, this was the first pay-per-view that I saw TNA back in those days, giving Austin Aries, aka Austin Starr, the big push. So he won the Kevin Nash Invitational, right? That match between Chris Sabin and Senshi, holy cow! And that ending with the cradle shot, holy shit! Then also the hardcore match between Christian and Rhino, LAX versus AJ and Daniels, and that main event. And by the way, Sting looked, terrific. He looked on shape during that pay-per-view. That's something I guess people have criticized, over the years, because he was getting a little bit chubby and wrestling under a teacher. But during this pay-per-view, Sting had a six-pack ab. Don't get it twisted. And they did a couple of old school type of spots. They even did the two-stump to tube-stump a spot that it is done by basically technical wrestlers. They did it, Jarrett and Sting. They did it perfectly. So this was a badass pay-per-view, one of my favorite ones. And there's no way that I could put over this show. This show was incredible, and the look. This is my favorite look done by TNA, and I wish they once again, when they start doing stuff on the road, they will take that approach of doing the chore, a smaller arena, but with a wide crowd, so it looks bigger than it actually is. Go ahead, Hurls.
Yeah, and like you just said, that was one of my points I was going to bring up. This was the first time TNA went outside of the Impact Zone besides the Asylum. This was for a pay-per-view for sure, but this was kind of the first time that TNA kind of experimented with touring for the most part. And you were right. Sting was in really good shape during this match, and it was a great match. And it was so cool to have Kurt Angle as the special enforcer. It kind of had a Starrcade 97 feel to it a little bit, with, Bret Hart as the enforcer versus Sting versus Hogan. But it was a really good pay-per-view. Christian Cage versus Rhino. That was a great street fight. Also, you mentioned it earlier, Raven. Chris Sabin versus Senshi was phenomenal. The Eric Young stuff was hilarious. What can you say about the Monsters Ball match? Not the best Monsters Ball match, but certainly very good. And you're right, Austin Starr. It was a very strange gimmick, but it was cool to see young Austin Aries get that type of push. And I must say, after this event, though, a lot of fans were very pissed off, because after this event was the time right after Vince Russo got hired again. So a lot of people think this was for all the really anti-Vince Russo people, this was the last event that they thought was good for TNA for a long time.
I didn't know about that part, at least. I don't know how I missed it, man, because I remember I enjoyed the Christian versus Rhino feud, and the 8 Mile Street fight was fucking great. It really was, and I can't believe I missed writing that down here on my notes. Something important. But so after Bound for Glory, huge fallout. Of course, we got Angle and Joe heating up, because that's where it had to go. Daniels returns to the X Division, and right after Sabin finally gets it from Senshi, Daniels beats him and AJ in a triple threat to win the belt. But also a thing, man, that I've always wanted to talk. So the James Gang changed their names to the Voodoo Kin Mafia, a.k.a. VKM, a.k.a. Vincent Kennedy McMahon. They declared war on the WWE by making fun of the fucking reformed PGDX. And they took shots at the WWE. They tried to do the like invasion kind of stuff. I know the Impact dude and a lot of people were anti the VKM stuff. I fucking loved every second of the VKM stuff. I thought that was something Impact needed to do, to bring the balls to it. And, because there was real life heat between BJ or BG and Kip towards Triple H and Shawn Michaels. And I thought everything that these guys were doing was fucking good until they actually stopped taking the shots at WWE. But I felt like this is what they need, that ballsy ECW, WCW shit to come back at them. Stuff I've wished Impact would have done over the past couple of years. But, Hurls, what did you think about VKM?
It was definitely, I'm not like anti-Russo like a lot of people are. I'm not like, I think he does have good ideas, and I think he's, I don't necessarily think he needs to have like all his ideas filtered out, but that was definitely a Vince Russo idea. But yes, you are correct. It played in perfectly with the whole, feud that, BG James and Kip James were doing with Triple H and Michaels at the time. And all the stuff that we got from it was pretty hilarious. The Big Dick Johnson or whatever they called him, I can't remember. That was making fun of that. They had somebody dress up as Triple H, and they had all this stuff that they were just kind of shooting on WWE. They even showed up at the headquarters. There was just a lot of good stuff that did come out of it. Some of it may have been a little stupid, but it got the message over, and it was entertaining. It was definitely a Russo idea, but it was definitely entertaining.
Yeah. So my thoughts about the BKM, I actually like it. I like that angle. One thing that I have comment a couple of times is that one of the things Impact Wrestling used to do before was poking fun at World Wrestling Entertainment. That is something, straight out of the Rules for Radicals book, something that I wish Impact Wrestling would implement those tactics into the wrestling world. And that is, like the books said it. The ridicule is a man's most potent weapon. So that is the type of stuff that you want your fans, not only you on your TV show, but also your fans. And you want your fans to do that to their fans. So obviously that was when, by the way, this was the time around when people were chanting TNA at the WWE shows. That was how much energized the base, the TNA Impact Wrestling base, was at this moment in time. And obviously, BKM, even though they were not homegrown talent, they were one of those catalysts that make the angle over, and obviously Impact Wrestling TNA so over that the fans from the other side of town were chanting those three letters. Go ahead, Raven.
That's it, man. We head into, and I'm so used to the way that they traditionalize the pay-per-views, in the later years. So for some reason, we're at Genesis in November. We had highlights. Eric Young defeating Bobby Roode, and it's one thing that sucks about kind of starting now is we don't really get to talk about how great Team Canada was back then. There was Scott D'Amore managing A1, kind of the bum of them all. But you had Petey Williams, Eric Young, Robert Roode, three guys who turned on to just be awesome stars for the company. Daniels defends and retains against Chris Sabin. One thing I also want to mention, man, that the music that was so great back in the day was Hail Sabin. Christian Cage defeating AJ Styles, which that was awesome. The heel Christian stuff, it wasn't too bad this time around. LAX defeating AMW. So and we're gonna talk AMW more next 2007. But here's the weird one, man. So the fucking rules were, if I remember right, the title can change hands by DQ or a countout, but Abyss gets his only heavyweight title reign in NWA TNA, however you want to look at it, TNA Impact, by beating Sting in a DQ in this match. So Abyss becomes our champ right after Sting wins the belt. It's kind of Russo-ishing up. It goes into a very stupid fucking storyline too. But of course, at the end, we have Kurt Angle defeating Samoa Joe. There's a lot of talk over if that was the right decision or not between Angle and Joe. We're gonna discuss that here in a minute. But Hurls, any thoughts on the pay-per-view itself you want to throw out there?
Yeah, this left a lot of bad taste in a lot of. I remember at this time, this is when a lot of people. I don't want to say this is when the LOL TNA started, but it's definitely a precursor to it, because a lot of people were very upset about Abyss winning via DQ, and then this was the feud that they were kind of going on with the whole storyline of Abyss. Didn't they say he shot his brother or something? It was really weird, really weird.
Some shit. And it turned out James Mitchell was his dad, and Sting freed him eventually.
Yeah, it was very strange. This could be probably the start of when Abyss's booking kind of took a turn for the worse. When they kind of started, when I think Abyss kind of started losing his edge a little bit. But Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe, really good match. I just remember a lot of people wanted Joe to win that match. I don't know if I'm on that page, but I know a lot of people thought, oh, you're taking the WWE guy and you're pushing him over the homegrown TNA guy. So that's a lot of what the feeling was around that time. I remember it pretty much like it was yesterday. But the as far as the wrestling goes, it was very, very fun. Great. It was very great. It was a very good pay-per-view.
Yeah, so Genesis 2006. This pay-per-view, a solid pay-per-view. The thing that I was not that, how can I put it, is that Kurt Angle beat Samoa Joe, and this was the first time Samoa Joe lost on TNA. This was the end of his undefeated streak for, I think it was 18 months or something along those lines. So kind of giving that whole thing his first night, it was and by the way, at that moment in time, I was very active on wrestling forums, most likely PWS. So there were people kind of saying, hey, the WWE guys are gonna take over, ha ha ha. And this was kind of the start of that movement of people of bringing in negativity. As for Abyss, I have a lot of respect for Abyss. I grew up watching him in IWA Puerto Rico. So watching him win the belt, I was happy, but I wish they would do it into a more traditional way. And by the way, it is kind of criminal that he never got a second chance to hold the belt on TNA. Never again. So it is what it is, right? But as far as this pay-per-view, this is a good one, but kind of controversial when you're talking about the history of TNA Impact Wrestling. Go ahead, Raven.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, the Abyss thing, I do think this is really where it's kind of, obviously his career started taking more and more hits, but I really think this is where Abyss began to lose his edge for sure. This storyline with him and James Mitchell, and I can't remember if it was his family, if it was his brother, his parents, or whatnot, but it was very, 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 very resembling Paul Bearer, Kane, and Undertaker kind of a thing. And then Sting, of course, at a later time, getting the monster to turn face. But It is kind of fucked up. Abyss never got another title shot, but the main thing is people talking about how much of a bad decision it was to have Kurt Angle go over Samoa Joe, and I disagree. I've disagreed the entire time since it happened. I think for one, the streak's got to end at some point. You weren't building up some, and they always say it should be some new up and comer guy that comes up. That's not necessarily always the case, and sometimes there's no one out there. And when they say they put the WWE guy, it's different because he's the Olympic gold medalist. He's a fucking legend, the icon in the prime of his career. And it wasn't like they had Kurt Angle there for the short term, and they were expecting Kurt to hardly be there. And Kurt was there for like 10 years and carried the company on his back. So, I think it was dumb as fuck for them to freak out. And plus, obviously we know Joe got it back and there was a rivalry. So I think people should have put that to bed. But last pay-per-view of the year, we're about to finish off 2006. So paparazzi series still going on. Senshi wins in a five-man match. Jesus Christ. Vince Russo strikes back. And the goofiness of EY is born. Eric Young defeats Tracy Brooks, Kaz's gorgeous wife, in a bikini contest, guys. Just Jesus Christ. Jerry Lynn popped back up. Big fan of Jerry Lynn in the X Division. He refereed a match where Daniels retained against Chris Sabin again. And to start the feud, AJ Styles defeating Rhino, which was a pretty good feud for the most part, although it had some Vince Russo-esque moments. Abyss, the validation of this match is he retained against Sting and Christian Cage in a three-way match. And then the main event being the rematch where Samoa Joe got one over on Kurt Angle to close out December. Fucking Russo. Robert, anything to say? We'll have Hurls kind of cap off the end of 2006 here.
This pay-per-view, another solid one. I think this was actually my favorite one of the first three matches between Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle. This was almost 20 minutes long. It was a little bit more of a slower on the slower pace one, but this was, I think, the best one. By the way, during this time was when Raven stopped wrestling every single week, and he was in charge of the Serotonin group, a group that didn't go that well, but it is what it is, right? And the Abyss match with Sting and Christian, it was okay. By the way, I kind of enjoy was seeing Tonko coming into Impact Wrestling. I wasn't sure at that time, but I think he complemented Christian Cage and his pro Hollywood persona pretty well. Go ahead, Hurls.
Yeah, I remember Eric Young with the bikini T-shirt. I remember that like it was yesterday. Yeah, the Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle the second match was phenomenal. It was a great main event. It was great to see Joe finally get the victory and even the score 1-1. I think it calmed some of the smarks down a little bit, but like you said, Raven, it's freaking Kurt Angle. I don't know what they were bitching. I don't really know. I was very irritated at it. I was just like, can we just, respect the matches for what they were instead of worrying about who wins and who loses. I don't think it hurt Samoa Joe at all, so the triple threat was good. If I remember correctly, it was a pretty solid match. Now, Raven, did you say Conan? Because Conan was still with LAX at this point.
Was it? I mean, the information that I got said he left around Hard Justice or something, but I don't remember too much. But I mean, if you got to say it, man.
Yeah, because he was. I mean, I went to Lockdown 07. He was still there. I do remember he was still with. It's possible that he was injured to the point around Hard Justice where he couldn't wrestle again. I don't know, but yeah, this was.
He used to wrestle in the second company with the 3 Live Crew.
Yeah, he did wrestle with them. He was just. I think that he was definitely still with the company because I remember him in the flag match. He was out there, so it was a good way to end 06. I think obviously the hottest angle was definitely Joe versus Kurt Angle. And I think, a lot of people were still buzzing about that and how they got Kurt Angle. So decent pay-per-view. I don't think it was anything amazing though.
Yeah. I think 2006 overall was an amazing year for TNA in its own right. I mean, you got Sting, Christian Cage, Kurt Angle. I mean, hard to top that. I feel like they became a superior product consistently week in and week out to the WWE, and that has never changed since that year. There's been times that I felt WWE is a better product throughout those years that I still watched WWE, but TNA I think was just clicking on all cylinders. Roster is getting good, great tag team matches and feuds. Obviously a lot to come, but I don't know if anyone has anything left they want to say before we stop 2006 here. We're going to be releasing 4 shows, and we're going to do 2006, 7, 8, and 9 coming up. Before we end 2006, Robert or Hurls, was there anything left out there that you want to throw in about the year?
Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me right, I think during this time, TNA was still a 1 hour show, right?
Yes. They 2006 when the fall of 2005 when they got on the Spike TV deal, they were about 1 hour until I want to say mid 2007.
So keep in mind they built all these angles only with 1 hour of television. So this was good, especially when you judge it that way. They did the best that they could with the tools that they have available. So this was a solid year for Impact Wrestling. Not my favorite one, but we're gonna get there really soon. So I guess that's it that I have to say about TNA in 2006. Go ahead, Hurls.
Yeah, 2006 was amazing. I mean, you got Sting, Kurt Angle, you got I'm probably forgetting a few, but like you got so many big names and you got so many great feuds. You had so many great matches. You could make an argument like this was the pinnacle of TNA. You could. And you could also make an argument that this was the year that TNA had the best crowds, the loudest fans. There was a lot of great stuff, and there really wasn't that much bad stuff that happened. I mean, sure, you got Vince Russo back in the company, and you got Jeff Jarrett winning titles still. And even though we didn't like the Slammiversary finish, but there was so much great stuff that was happening. I mean, Spike TV was going strong. The ratings were going higher and higher and higher. They were just doing some great stuff. And 2006, I think when you look at it, it was an amazing year for TNA, and it catapulted them into the mainstream. There's no question about it.
Absolutely, man. 2006, a great year. We're going to wrap it up there. Stay tuned, everyone. We're 2007 TNA should be released very shortly. I want to thank Hurls and Robert very, very much for coming on here and kind of saving me. Honestly, I mentioned how P.D. Williams said that this was the Attitude Era for him. I'm going to be honest, it was the RAV's Attitude Era as well. I did a lot of drinking and some other substances I shouldn't do. Kind of fried my brain a lot, so there's a lot of stuff I do not remember. So these two have really helped me along. I had a lot of fun doing this, and check out 2007. The nostalgia shows are coming soon. Heelcast out.